You've probably heard by now that you should go where you're treated best. That means if your country isn't treating you the best, then maybe you should go somewhere. But how practical is that really? Well, today's guest tells us that he is living that firsthand. He tried to get out of his country many times and was finally able to, and he's been living the life abroad. We talk about what it took to get out of there, why he decided to make that change, what it's been like to live as a digital nomad, why you may want to reconsider before you make the same mistakes or take the same steps. And then we dig into what's really causing this problem. We talk about the financial incentives, the financial markets that's leading to supply chain constraints, power, energy crises, and so many other things. It all fits together, and you may not have put this together. We talk about what's going to happen over the next couple of years and what he sees happening. Now, this guest, Stephan Livera, is also going to be joining us at the Market Disruptors Live event that's coming up next month in Miami, Florida. There's more information down below. If you want to find out from the top 15 experts in the world what they think is going to happen over the next couple of years, and most importantly, what you should be doing to survive and thrive these next couple of years, then you want to check out the Market Disruptors Live event. Learn how to build, grow, and protect your wealth. Asset protection, build your wealth, plan B, passports, cash flow, you name it. We're going to cover it. Check it out down below. But let's go ahead and jump right into the interview with Stephan. All right, Stephan, thank you so much for joining me. Excited to have you back again.
Mark, always great to be with you.
So, we've had you on before. We talked about some different subjects, but the world's changed a lot since then. Your life has changed a lot since then. And there's some things that you're doing that I'm just super curious about, interested about. I'd love to sit down and have a drink with you, in which we will, and we'll talk about that coming up next month. But I thought, let's have a conversation everyone can tune into. And so for everyone that's not aware, you're from Australia. The country of Australia has been kind of the poster child for following in China's footsteps. And you had a tough time getting out of that country, and now you've been living a life on the run. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what it's like in Australia, what the mindset would be for deciding to leave, deciding to stay, what it's like being out kind of like this nomad lifestyle. What are some of the, long-term ramifications of what these policy decisions are, where we think this is going. Hopefully we can get through all this. I'm pretty ambitious with that, Stephan. But anyway, just give us a little bit of background on, I guess, what you're doing and kind of what's going on right now.
Right. So as you said, I'm living life on the run, or living as a digital nomad, or the other one I've heard, which I like, is high-tech homeless. So so I'm basically traveling around. Part of that is because of my role as a Bitcoin speaker, educator, podcaster, whatever you want to call it, because I'm going around to conferences. And so for me, being locked down in Australia was just not working for me, right? It was just very bad. And so I saw it like, it's in Australia, it's the worst of both worlds, right? They're very highly hysterical, and they're very highly locked down this, restriction that, travel ban that, etc. And at the same time, it's also quite a high tax nation. And so you could maybe justify living there if they weren't so hysterical, because you'd be like, hey, look, it's a high quality of life, whatever you want to do, if you want to, surfing or whatever other hobbies or whatever things you're into, you can pretty much find that in Australia in 2019, right? And so 2020 hits, and I'm spending all this time locked down, and I'm just thinking, this is crazy. I'm missing out on all of these incredible Bitcoin events and community things all around the world, all because of the accident of my birth, of having been born to a family who, took me to Australia when I was a baby. Now, I don't want to be like, I obviously had benefits and opportunities that came from that. But as of 2020 onwards, it was becoming more of a liability to stay in Australia than to leave Australia. And so at that point, I was just thinking, hopefully things will open up, and eventually we'll, obviously I was trying to get out, right? I just wasn't able to. And then, so 2020 was happening, and basically there was all these conferences that went virtual instead of live in person. But then 2021 happened, and now there were conferences and events happening in person, and I wanted to obviously get out to them. And so the big one for me was Bitcoin 2021. I really wanted to go. And so that conference I was applying to get out, because again, in Australia, it's very permission-seeking behavior. So you have to ask your overlords for permission to leave. And so I didn't have any other way. So I was applying for exemptions, applying to try to get out, and I was applying, rejection. But I kept trying. And now I was very lucky. Like most people would not have been able to do what I did, which was essentially rely on my business aspect to be able to get out. And so I had some of my sponsor Bitcoin, podcast sponsor companies like Swan and other people who wrote letters saying, yeah, we need Stephan out. We need him for some live events here in America. And I had conferences writing letters saying, yeah, we need Stephan out. We need him out. And so that was what eventually got me the approval to leave. And so that was essentially my story of getting out. But it was certainly, there were a lot of trade-offs and things that I had to take, right? I had to leave behind family and friends. I had to leave behind the life that I had there. And so, but at the same time, there's challenges and there are opportunities. And so from my point of view, it was like the challenge was how do I, disassociate from Australia as much as possible, sell the car, shut down bank accounts, shut down everything as much as possible so that I can at least not be a tax resident of Australia. And so at that point, I'd basically gone through, shut down, closed off everything I could. I asked for some expert advice as well on some of these aspects. And then I managed to get that approval to leave. And then I was saying, well, you know what, I'll go for these conferences and basically just travel around and hop around into different countries. Now, the benefit I had there is having the Australian passport, which is obviously a relatively strong passport document and easy to travel in terms of visa-free travel. And so that part was a benefit, or at least something I had going in my favor already. And so that's been my life, is just sort of hopping around to different places, basically following the conference circuit until I am able to establish more I without doxing too much of my personal situation, I've established a home, but it's more like I might go back and check in there periodically, but I'm just, because of the conference circuit, I'm traveling around for that more right now.
Hey, hold up just for a second. I want to tell you about something. I just got something cool in the mail I want to show you, and it is this new sleek package I just got with a brand new credit card. This isn't just any credit card. This is a BlockFi credit card that's powered by Visa, and it's backed by Bitcoin rewards. So this is a Visa card. I can use it anywhere in the world that Visa is accepted, and the benefit of this BlockFi Visa card is that I get paid back in Bitcoin. Most of my other cards pay me in some sort of reward points. I get airline miles. I'm not very good at using those. They end up accumulating and I don't do anything with them. But getting to earn Bitcoin back with every single purchase is of course something that matters to me. Now, I know for a lot of people they say that the price of Bitcoin is too high. So I say, well, you can always earn Bitcoin. You can get paid in Bitcoin, or you can just get cash back rewards on every purchase paid in Bitcoin with the BlockFi Visa credit card, used everywhere that Visa is accepted. And if you want to sign up for the Visa card that pays back in Bitcoin from BlockFi, there is a link in the description down below. Check it out. Yeah. So there's so many different stories coming out of it. I mean, I try to catch the news stories and try to dig in kind of social media, see what boots on the ground are saying about what's going on in Australia. The reason why I think people should care about this is it's not just about Australia. We're obviously seeing Canada trying to do, pretty much the exact same things, or they are doing the same things. The United States is trying to do them to more limited capacity. Other nations are, but I think at the end of the day, like, this is a global problem, and I think these things are going to continue to creep. And so I think it's important to kind of look at maybe Australia kind of as like this leading indicator, like, hey, what's happening there is good chance maybe coming to where you're at. And so when I look at what's going on in Australia, I see, some areas like, seems like crazy lockdowns. You're not allowed to even go over state lines. I saw like on Father's Day, they built like this Berlin Wall type thing where family couldn't even get together. They're like hugging over this wall. Like, it was incredible. But then other areas seem to be more free than others, but maybe still can't get around state lines. Maybe give us a kind of like a little overview of like what it's like over there.
Yeah, sure. So what most people saw on Twitter and on social media was obviously the worst of the worst, right? It was some of the craziest stuff going on in Melbourne and various other places in Australia where maybe that was the worst of the authoritarianism. But nevertheless, there was still very strong authoritarianism all around Australia, because what happened is the I think if I had to try to look into the mind of the typical Australian, in their mind, they thought, oh, look, see, we did such a good job shutting down early. We were good. We were better
Yeah.
than those other countries because they were one of the lucky few, right? Australia was the quote unquote lucky country,
Yeah.
27 years or 28 years without a recession. And I think part of that is the complacency that drove to this mindset, which
Mhm.
now led to Australia being the testbed, as you said, for a lot of the hysteria and the digital control aspects that are coming into our lives. And even a year or two ago, if you said this, it was you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, and now it's reality. But to go back to your question around what kind of restrictions there were at various points. So in Australia, that first 6 weeks was like proper lockdown, but the idea being you should still go to work if you couldn't work from home. That was sort of the line, basically. But then what happened is after that, there was a lot of internal borders and state closures going on. So they would shut off to each other because they would say, oh, look, you're a red zone. You've got all these cases. You haven't done hard enough. And so at that time, they thought this idea of zero COVID was possible, that it was even feasible to actually stop this thing, because they were sort of living a lie. They were living this illusion. And so I think what happened in one sense is that the politicians sort of drove this panic into the people and the media helped them. And then because then the people now were so panicked, they saw it like it was like this feedback loop that the people now were so panicked that the politicians had to keep doing this kind of lockdown, very hysterical policies that unfortunately don't actually, they're not necessarily working, but they have to keep that lie going as long as possible. And so that's why it seems to me like a lot of Australians still believed in this idea that, oh, just lock down hard enough. Oh, see, something went wrong. Oh, see, they just didn't lock down early enough because lockdowns work, right? That's in their mindset. That's what they think. Or they think, oh, see, people in, say, Victoria would be looking up at New South Wales, the Premier Gladys, saying, oh, see, Gladys didn't lock down early enough and she didn't do a mask mandate, whereas look at us. And then never mind. And then the thing is, that goes against reality because then Melbourne's case, having had one of the hardest and longest lockdowns in the world, they still had their cases blow out. And so it's like they're immune to reality. And so it's like this idea that any good outcome is attributed to state intervention and any bad outcome is attributed to not enough state intervention. And that's just the prism that they're looking through. And they're unable to, even if you show them the data, show them the charts, show them the statistics, it just unfortunately, they are impervious to those kinds of facts. They just look at what is the spin the media gives me and what is the TV telling me, and I'll just follow along with that.
As you're saying that, just those two things, anything good they attribute to the state and anything bad, it's the people, makes me think back to, two books, I guess, like Anatomy of the State and The Law. Probably when you read those two books, you realize that the state is primary goal is to increase its power. And so in order to increase its power, they enlist, the media, but mostly academia, to talk about how good it is, how necessary policies are, how necessary government intervention is, right? And so I think I don't know, that's what I was thinking of when you were saying that.
100%. Yeah,
So,
I think yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I was also thinking about, as you were saying, how Australia hasn't had like really a recession in 23 years. And so there's this complacency going on. And so then I think back to this generational theory that got popularized, for the fourth turning, which is the good times creating soft men, the soft men creating bad times. And so if there hasn't been any hardship to go through, as you said, for 23 years, then those good times, they lasted way too long and people got super complacent. And so I think that's interesting as well. One thing I think of, and being in America, I hear talks of them, potentially, maybe the government throws this out there to see what the reaction is and pulls it back, but they've floated around. Well, one, I think the borders are closing to people that don't take the medicine, don't take the jab. We'll say that. And then they've talked about in the United States even making it where maybe you couldn't even fly. That's at least been floated out there. And even closing interstate travel, kind of like what's happened in Australia. And so when I hear that, I'm like, well, shoot, if that's going to happen, I'm out. Like, I don't want to be locked down either. I would rather go kind of travel around in the world, kind of what you're doing. I'm just curious what the mindset do you think is the difference? Because some people are just so used to it? They're just so okay with it that they're fine just being locked down. They want to stay. Is it that they don't care enough about freedom, or that maybe they're not in a position where they can do that? I mean, what was the mindset of you deciding to leave, and what do you think most people are staying put for?
Yeah, good question. I think for most people, they really don't want to buck the trend publicly. They really don't want to do that. They're very unwilling to. And I think it's people perhaps like you and me who are more willing to just buck the trend and to say, no, I believe in this. And so in Australia, the culture is very much that, and I mean, look, to some extent, it's like that here in America too, right? But
Sure.
in Australia, it was just very, people just thought, well, you know what? My life is not that bad here, and it's going to be okay. We just wait it out, and and you just take this medicine, and it's going to all go away. But that's not really actually going to be the case, because then soon they're going to say you need booster medicine,
Right.
and so it's just going to continue.
You're never done. Yeah, you're never done.
Exactly, and it becomes the pretense for all kinds of other surveillance and control in our lives. So the fact that now there's been a lot more work done around digitally summing up and pulling together all the information of all the medicines you've taken, such that they are, this aspect of control. And the same kind of the parallel is like in the world of having a wealth tax or an unrealized capital gains tax. Well, now they're going to have to start looking at what assets do you actually own, so they know whether to apply that to you or not. So it's a similar kind of thing, right? These aspects of control and digital identity and all of these aspects are now coming in, and it's really funny because maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there was this whole idea of the Australia card, the Australia ID, and people were very, very strongly resisting it at that point. But I think to what we were saying earlier, that complacency, Australia having 27 years without a recession, and I think to some extent fiat has helped enable this. So China and the connection between China and Australia, and having a lot of sales into China, and having a lot of like a big property, what they call property boom, which I think of it more like a property bubble, but basically the fiat credit drives these huge bubbles. And so Australia really had a lot of a mineral industry, right? Resource extraction, and a lot of other industries had been either regulated away or made less competitive because of electricity prices going high. And so I think this has led to a very much of a compliance culture, that you have to just comply. And that the years gone by, if you think maybe 20 years ago, or even up until recently, people used to think of Australians as these tough men. You think of like Steve Irwin, Steve Irwin and Paul Hogan, and these guys who are literally going to wrestle a crocodile and have a drink and have a smoke, and it's all right and she'll be right. That stereotype is very much gone, I would say. I think, and growing up in Australia, that was very much the feeling, that you kind of live amongst this culture of tough men and people who don't take crap, basically. And then it just seems like the culture just really went down, and that now that whole idea of rebel, outlaw, larrikin spirit is very much gone. It's now very much a compliant culture, very docile, and very permission-seeking. Now, some of that could be that aspect, the cultural degeneration in a way, but part of it is also the state has just become so much more powerful. Mm-hmm. They have a lot more surveillance. They have a lot more kind of vehicles and tools and helicopters and things that they can use to subdue people. And so anytime a protest even starts, they come out full force, and they will use all sorts of techniques. And so in Melbourne, there were some protests going on, and so they would use techniques like kettling, this idea of kind of creating a perimeter around the people. And these are unarmed people, and they are mostly peaceful people, right? They really are peaceful in these protests. For the most part, it might have been like maybe a few people who are violent or whatever, and then that becomes the pretense to then become a very violent aggressor against the whole mob of them, even though maybe, and for all we know, we don't know if that was just like some random person trying to, use that moment to be violent or whatever. But for the most part,
plant.
Could be. I mean, for all we know. And so basically they really just came back with overwhelming force. And there were some really crazy things being done, like social media posts being scanned, and everybody saw that story of the poor pregnant lady who had made a Facebook protest because she made a Facebook page, and then the police rock up and arrest her while she's pregnant and about to go to her ultrasound in an hour or something. So it was very confronting for a lot of people. But I think a lot of people just sort of kept thinking, oh, it won't happen here. Oh, let's just comply and let's just wait. And I think the other aspect of it is certain parts of Australia have basically been coerced to take the medicine. They've been saying, if we don't hit 80% double medicine, you're not getting your freedom back. If we don't hit 90, and then they just keep moving the bar.
Saying that. Yeah. Yeah. Literally telling him that. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And so similar with New Zealand, right? Jacinda Ardern, the PM, Prime Minister of New Zealand, has basically openly said, yeah, we're going to create two classes. We're going to create the medicated and the unmedicated. It's just insane.
Yeah. It's insane. I saw that and openly saying that. And it's crazy. Just, we still look back. I mean, the world still looks back on the Holocaust in Nazi Germany as the greatest atrocity that, the world's ever seen. We'll never forget, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not that far back. And like I said, the world still references it. But yet here we are doing the exact same thing over again, which is insane. I know for everybody listening, this isn't my typical content. Obviously, we talk about money and the finance markets. And we're going to tie that in. What I love about Stephan talking to you is that you really come from this Austrian school of economics, which isn't just this kind of math side of money, but it's really tying in the human and the psychology of all that in. And so that's why this is important. I think when you're looking at macroeconomics, I've gotten told many times, Mark, I like to listen to you for the finance stuff. I don't want to hear about the politics. But it's like, if you don't understand the politics, you're never going to understand the money side. So we'll tie that in. But before we dig into that, I want to talk about kind of where this leads, and then kind of what fixes this, and kind of what the future holds. But before we do, I was just thinking. So you've been living life on the run. Now, as I said, I've thought to myself, shoot, before I get locked down, I'll probably leave as well. And I truly believe, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but I truly believe that obviously the world's trending towards authoritarianism. Anybody knows that. Anybody can see that. And I truly believe the way that ends is through competition. And so when states are forced to compete, or countries are forced to compete, and so moving around is something that kind of will help build that competition. But you've been doing it. And maybe it's not as easy as it sounds. Maybe it's easier. Maybe it's harder. Is it as romantic? Is it as cool? Is it as fun? Give us kind of give us a boots on the ground kind of experience of what that's been.
Yeah.
Like.
Look, I mean, I won't lie. There's been a lot of additional stress in terms of figuring things out logistically. You have to think about, okay, not just flight and hotel like you previously did. Now you're thinking, okay, what are the entry conditions for this country? Most of them will do negative test, basically, a negative PCR test or negative antigen test in some cases. But then you also have to think, okay, the country might have a certain rule, but then the airline might have its own rules as well. So you need to think about that too. Then you've this constant, every time you move, you're sort of thinking, okay, what are the rules for the next place? And the other thing is, if you're trying to do it like this, sometimes some countries will actually expect you to have an ongoing flight out when you come in. So then you might need to think about that also. On top of that, you have to think about, well, what am I doing in terms of my banking and my ability to purchase things overseas? And so that's where you might be able to use some of these international cards. And so that's one aspect of it. You might need to also look at what are the rules and restrictions in terms of going to that country. Do I need to fill out a form? Do I need to whatever, depending on which country I'm from? It takes a little bit of research. There are some interesting websites. One is called canitravel.net. That's an interesting one because it sort of shows, okay, based on your passport and where you are, can you go to this other place? So I've been using that a little bit.
Is it pretty accurate, you think?
It's relatively, but at the same time, I would kind of use that to get a high-level idea and then go further research by looking at the actual. Obviously, you try to go to the primary source. Like if you can find the government website, that's better than just trusting somebody else's summary. And of course, because things are changing. A lot of it's really
vague, though, right? Like a lot of it's vague. Like they don't really tell you exactly.
Exactly right. And so I'll give you an example. So I recently went to Dubai for Tone Vays's conference, and we were doing Understanding Bitcoin, right? And so teaching about Bitcoin. And while I was going there, I was looking at the rules, and it looked like there were all these different rules, and it was like 10 pages, and this, that, and the other, and I was a bit like, whoa, okay. But I found some forms, so I printed those out and filled those out, and I got a negative test, and I have my passport. And so then I flew to Dubai. They asked for my negative test, so I showed them that. They did a test on arrival. And then I went to the to the immigration or customs line, and basically the border agent, I was expecting to get grilled. I was expecting him to say, "Were you this? Were you that? Where have you been?" Like, it was relatively like easy. Like, they basically had said where, in some places they'll ask you where you were, but in this case, I think he asked me where I was and asked for my passport, and then stamp, in you go. So. In some places, it's like the lesson is, in some places, the rules, if you look on the website, look like really there's all these rules, but then in practice on the ground, it's not necessarily like that. But again, some of that is luck of the draw. I might have found a guy who was relatively, easy on that day, or, some of that is a bit like that. But yeah, bringing it back to your question, it is very difficult, but at the same time, I would rather do this than be stuck in Australia. Yeah. So for me, it's choose your poison. As painful as it is, and it can be more expensive to be constantly on the run or constantly moving from hotel to hotel, but that has been worth it for me because I have income that's remote. Now, yeah. I'm fortunate in that way that I can do my podcast, I can do my work remote, but a lot of jobs are remote now, so you can do these things. And I think, again, so the challenges and opportunity side. The opportunity is you can go to really cheap places and you can have incredible quality of life and incredible things. So as an example, I was meeting up with some fellow Bitcoin friends, and we went down to Colombia. And so I was in Colombia for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, a short time, yeah. But it was incredible. Like, the amount of, we could order steaks and get like incredible steaks for like $15 or $20 that would normally cost $80 or $100 or more in America. So wow. It's like the opportunities are also very good as well, but you need to be willing to make certain trade-offs, that certain things may not be available or accessible to the same level that you have in the Western world, America, Australia, yeah. And so on. So you make certain trade-offs, but you can have really cool experiences and nice things that you wouldn't normally get for that price in other countries if they are open and maybe a little bit of a country where on average they're a bit poorer. Well, then your dollar will take you, or your sats will obviously take you a lot further there.
Yeah. I just wanted to take a second to explain to you one more time just how cool having this new BlockFi Visa credit card is. I've started to move a lot of my bills over to get paid from this. Of course, all my business supplies, I'm starting to pay for this, my advertising budgets, and I'm starting to run as much as I can through it because I'm getting paid a percentage back of every single transaction in Bitcoin. We want to save in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is an asset that goes up in value because of the deflationary nature of it. And we want to spend our fiat. So I'm spending my fiat through my BlockFi Visa card, and I'm getting back Bitcoin that I can save and I can hold. I expect it to go up in value a lot. I expect to hold my Bitcoin. I'm gonna pass it to my kids and my grandkids, and hopefully my great grandkids will have my Bitcoin one day. So I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna spend my fiat through this card, and I'm gonna earn back Bitcoin that I'm gonna save. If you wanna get one, there's a link down below. Yeah, I think a couple things I'm thinking of. One, unfortunately, the way the world is in its current state today and where it's going, I just, unfortunately, I don't think you can have it all. You're going to have to be willing to trade something off, and so you have to figure out what that is. Even in the United States, for example, while we're still obviously pretty open compared to some of these other countries we're talking about, the Washington Post ran an article. So in the United States, we're having massive supply chain issues and inflation, like the rest of the world is, but it's getting pretty severe in the United States. As a matter of fact, schools are reporting they don't have food for their kids. They can't even get the boxes to make the cartons to put the milk in, and they can't get the meat for the school. So now they're substituting cheese fries. At a time where we're in a pandemic, we're worrying about health. Now we're feeding the students cheese fries for lunch, and all these things. And the Washington Post wrote an article, and they said Americans should just lower their expectations. That's what they said. So, I know you used to be, in the article is what it said, I know you used to be able to have like a bag to put your food in. Like she was talking about like carrying a loaf of bread and it would be in a bag. But now I'll just carry the bag. I'll carry the bread home without a bag. Like I'll just lower my expectations. And this is like at
Yeah,
the
very.
greatest time of prosperity in the history of the world, in the greatest country of the history of the world. And now Americans should just lower their expectations. You don't need to have all these things. And so you're saying, you may have to go to other countries and you may have to give up a couple of these comforts. Well, they're telling us we have to give them up here in the United States as well. So that's something I was thinking about. And then another thing I was thinking about is obviously you're a speaker, an educator, so you're traveling around a lot. But a lot of people maybe have families. And so they could just leave that restricted place, go to a cool spot in Colombia, Mexico, something like that, live open and free, have a lower cost of living. I mean, sure, maybe they give up a couple things, but still have a good cost of living, but they're free and they could travel if they want to, but they don't necessarily have to live that nomad lifestyle.
Correct, correct. And so there are different ways to approach this that you could look at setting up multiple bases. And if they're in cheaper countries, that might actually work out cheaper for you. Now, again, you do have to make certain trade-offs. You have to be comfortable with certain things. For example, if you're going to Colombia, I don't know much Spanish or really any at all, but that's one example where you might need to learn a little bit of the language. But certain places of the world are relatively open. So South America, some parts of Central America are relatively open and relatively good bang for buck. And I think one point I want to touch on as well, and this is bringing it to the economics and finance aspect of it as well, that you were saying in America, you guys, even Americans, are going to have to make trade-offs. And I think part of that is we have been living a lie, right? Because central banking and fiat money has driven this. We have believed that we are so rich when we've been looking at GDP number go up. And that's not necessarily what makes a society rich. What really makes a society rich is when people are able to save and do what's called capital accumulation. And they can then use that to create better technology to then go and make us more prosperous, right? Get cheaper and more reliable energy, or better computers and phone technology and internet entertainment technology and video games, or whatever productive technology. And I view it like a lot of the world has been living a lie. We have been living this lie that people can just all flip houses to each other, all driven by fiat credit, and we're all going to get rich that way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy, because it's like, what real value are people adding? Now, yes, it's true that you need a business of home building and to facilitate for, let's say, if there's a lot of new people coming to live in the country and so on. But I think it's gone too far. Like even in Australia, that's definitely a thing, this whole house flipping aspect. And you see these articles of this, 27-year-old who has 30 properties, and they've been flipping and flipping, and they've managed to make it because they've managed to play the financial aspect and the debt game very well.
Right. It's funny you say that. It's a perfect segue to jump. I want to ask you a couple of those things about living a lie, but funny you say about the house flipping, because I did that for about the first 10 years of my career, fixed and flipped over 100 of them myself. But this then it went into the housing boom that led to the crash in 2008. And I started after there was a big crash in California from 89 to 92. And about 95, the banks were sitting on all these repos that they couldn't get rid of, and they couldn't sell them because the houses were in such disrepair. To get a loan on a house, it has to have a kitchen, it has to have a floor, for example. And so the banks, I was buying these homes from the banks, and then I was adding value. I would put the kitchen, I'd put the floors, I'd put the things, and then so people could get loans and buy them. So I was creating value, but then started the housing boom where people were standing in line at a brand new track, a housing track, and they're going to buy 3 of those houses just because they thought they could sell them for more when they came up, which, to your point, is adding no value. And I was also I was going to work on a paper for this. I haven't gotten around to it, but I saw CNBC had this special. It was, I think they called it Generation Gamble, and it was talking about like the rise of these Robinhood traders, and now options trading has surpassed normal stock trading now. And so the whole world, crypto traders or option traders, whatever, they're trading, but to your point, they're not adding value. So they're increasing their US dollar supply without adding any value, and then they want to use that to suck off the value of others, which obviously doesn't work. So that's interesting. But back to the we're living a lie. I'm just curious about that, because obviously this expansion of debt and credit has allowed the world to kind of see this level of success, opulence, whatever, that maybe hasn't been earned to the point. But when it comes to like running it short on food supplies, for example, or not having a bag to put my bread in, that seems like it's more of a problem that was created by too much money has distorted the signals, and now it doesn't know how to organize properly.
Correct.
As opposed to, we probably never could have afforded the bags in the first place. It was only
100%.
there because of credit.
100%, I agree with you there. So that's the Austrian theory as well. It's that in the stages of the economy, the interest rate helps serve as a price signal. And
Right.
profit and loss, as entrepreneurs in the market, we should receive profit and loss signals. So if I am making a profit, that means I'm doing a lot of good for the market. I'm doing a lot of good for society because they
Right.
obviously value what the end outcome of what I make much more than the cost of all those input things that I had to consume or use to produce that output or the end
Right.
final product. And so what happens in our fiat world over the last 30, 40, 50 years, well, basically 1971 really accelerated all of this,
Right.
is basically entrepreneurs started getting sent the wrong signals. And so resources started flowing into the wrong industries, so to speak. And so it's not overinvestment, it's not underinvestment, it's malinvestment. And so that's the point that Mises and Rothbard and Hayek and others make. And so that essentially, we can think of it like if all the capital goods got rearranged into the wrong positions, right? So like as a quick example, and I've heard Bob Murphy use this example, it's this idea, imagine we went to sleep one night and we wake up and like the gardener's tools have shifted and they're sitting in the mechanic's shed and the mechanic's tools are sitting in someone else's, in like the office worker's place, and the office worker stuff is sitting in, and so you can think of it almost like the wrong tools are in the wrong place because we're not getting the right price signals. And so I think that is what's leading to this shortage, as you're saying, even in potentially very basic level things like a bag, right? And so another really interesting one I love is iPencil by Leonard Reed. So it's the same idea that no one person on earth knows how to make a pencil if you think about all of the input things that go into it. So in that same example, we might think, oh, look, it's just a bag to hold my groceries in. Actually, in order to make that bag, somebody had to, all the logistics involved. And so I think a lot of that is a result of government shutdowns, restrictions, lockdowns, travel bans, and so on, because there are all these butterfly effects that we have no idea, right? They might stop a factory in this one place, but that might have some downstream impact somewhere else on some product somewhere else. And that's why sometimes people get these weird shortages, like they might not have enough pork meat, but they've got like beef or they've got cows, or it's all these different weird impacts that we can't really even know.
Yeah, and then with the price being the signal being distorted. So typically they're saying now supply chains are backed up because the economy came roaring back bigger than they thought. Well, in the United States, they dumped in $8 trillion. So, of course, it came roaring back. And so typically, if the price of something went up, two things happen. One, some people would buy less of it. I think it's a couple things. So if the price signal's messed up, then typically as the price would be rising, people would buy less of it. So it'd be less demand. But when the government puts in $8 trillion into the market, the price goes up and people don't care. They'll just pay any price. But also it works on the opposite side. So if price goes up, manufacturers should make more of it. But because inflation's so high, it's too expensive to increase their supply. And then on top of that, you add in policies that are forcing people not to work or forcing people to quit their job, and it really just starts compounding. I was asked the other day if there was a magic wand and today we could just unwind all this stuff and just put it back to the way it was, how fast do you think things could get back to normal? I'm curious what your answer is.
Oh, I don't know if I would have any special insight, but I'd give it, 6 months.
Oh, really? That quick?
6 to 12 months in that kind of range is really what I think if they were to just let people go back to work without forced medication, without restrictions, without lockdowns, without travel bans, because at one level, people want their lives back. People want to be able to travel, right? That demand is there. It's very pent up in that way, but it's just that they've not been allowed to, or they've been stopped. And so I think, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm coming from, and maybe you are as well, like coming from more like a right-leaning kind of point of view where we want things to open up. But I think there is a significant part of the country and maybe the world who maybe they want to live a bit more of a closed-off life, some of them, right? Because they're a bit more worried about it. So
I was
yeah,
just
but
thinking, like
yeah,
in terms of supply chains, like I was reading some stuff earlier this week, and so maybe my mind's in a different place. But like in America, farm equipment, like tires for my truck, they're telling me it could take 6 to 9 months to get tires just for my truck, and I just drive a normal Ford pickup truck. Tractor tires, on the other hand, are almost impossible to get. I've heard reports of people, farmers, that if they need to order farm equipment or parts for their tractors, if they ordered now, best
yeah,
case scenario, they'd have them spring of 2023. If it comes a little bit late, you have to plant in the spring. If it comes a little bit late and they miss that spring plant, then it pushes food till 2024. That's 3 years
yeah.
away. So even in a crystal ball or magic wand scenario, like it just seems like these problems is going to take time to work out. Like how long is it going to take to get tires out or parts for that tractor?
Yeah. You know what? I think you're right. Like, I think maybe what I was thinking is more like Magic One back to like fully free market. If we're Magic One back to, say, 2019 kind of level of government, then yeah, I think you are right, that there are certain supply restrictions or certain things that they just take that much time to make. And given how crazy the shutdowns and lockdowns have been, there have been a lot of businesses that have now gone out of business. And so, I mean, certainly to your point, there would certainly be some skill sets where maybe the person retired because they were like, well, my business is done, and they've spent decades building up this skill set, and it's a very niche kind of advanced or very particular skill set, and that skill set is now just gone because that guy just retired, or his business went out and now he's not viable anymore, so he's just retired, or he's on a pension, or he's just not working. And then so like to that point, it's certainly, I think I could definitely see arguments for certain goods taking a long time to come back, right? Those could be on a longer cycle. That might be like 12 months, 18 months before we really start seeing those come back. And so we're going to be feeling the pain for some time.
Now, it seems to me, and I'm sure you would agree, that this is all kind of the victim of government intervention. Like the more meddling they do, the more effects that we see. And now we're seeing, in the United States again. Biden says he's going to go in and he's going to fix this. We can't unload ships fast enough in California. All the ships are off the coast, so he's going to come in and he's going to fix that. And it's like, no, like the more you meddle, the worse it's going to be. I saw this. A lawmaker, Raleigh, I think his name is, very well-meaning. I like him, but he says, I have an idea. He put a bill together that says all U.S. manufacturers have to get at least 50% of their goods from the U.S. And it's like, while that may be good thinking, like it seems like it's only going to cause things to get worse. And so I guess the question I'd have or ask you about, kind of, again, asking you to go into your crystal ball, it seems like if we both agree, which I'm sure we do, that this government intervention is really what's causing this. It's really starting to fall apart, like really fast. Energy crisis all throughout the world, et cetera, et cetera. At the rate that it's accelerating, how much longer do you think this can go on for before the whole system just crumbles on its own?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a good answer there. I see it like we're going to just keep limping. It's like the world economy is limping right now because we've been hamstrung. We just can't produce as effectively. And so I guess at a very quick guess is we're going to keep limping for another 6 to 12 months, even now, like even just given things as they are now. And with any hope, most of the world will start reopening. And hopefully, at least those parts of the world that are more open will see very strong productivity and economic growth. And then the rest of the world will then say, yeah, you know what, it is time. We need to open up. We need to at least start paring back some of these restrictions and things. But of course, it's kind of like a balance because on one side, there are the people who really want to push all this digital ID, surveillance, and all of these things. But then there's also that pressure to reopen. And so I'll give you a quick example, right? So I was in Sri Lanka. I was born in Sri Lanka, right? So I went there, I was hanging out with some family and stuff, and they continued to lock down, right? But then I think just recently now they've started to reopen up. They've started to sort of lower some of the travel restrictions that were there before, because I think they even know where their bread is buttered eventually, right? They know that they just can't stay shut forever. So I think it's the same sort of thing. Like the world is limping, but I think enough of the world is sane enough, or at least they feel the cost enough that they know they need to open things up. And then as things open up, then we're going to slowly come back. But of course, it's going to take time for some of these things to get rebuilt or to kind of put that structure back up.
I was thinking even from a bigger level, like it seems like this is all government intervention that's causing it, but we talked about the price signal being all distorted. The price signal in the United States is distorted. They printed $8 trillion and dumped it into the market. And so like that money printer sits at the base of all of this. And, we can go back through history, or even just right now today, we can see currencies around the world are blowing up. Lebanon, of course, obviously Iran, Argentina, Venezuela. And we saw, recently China, banned cryptocurrencies again for whatever the ninth time, but this was kind of like their final ban. And it's like what a nation does is they try to have this capital control laws, right? That keeps the capital from flowing out of the country. And so we're seeing these currencies blowing up, and those countries obviously kind of lose. And so if people have a good source to a release valve, a safety boat to go into, obviously like Bitcoin is there, then people start taking that. And then it almost kind of gets into this feedback loop where more people want to go, which then makes the currency kind of blow up even more. And it seems like because we have a good safety boat to go into, and I think at the same time, the rise of the internet, the rise of the information, which shows people what the game is, how bad inflation is, and that there's a safety net out there, it seems like it could probably unravel much quicker. Or maybe I'm just too hopeful.
Well, I definitely agree with you on those two factors, though, right? Like having Bitcoin as our safe harbor or our safe boat, it's our life raft for people who want to preserve their purchasing power, or even to be able to conduct commerce directly in Bitcoin. That's definitely there. And also the internet now makes it easy to propagate this information. But sadly, on the downside, now I'm with you there, but then on the downside, it's almost that now the information, it's with the internet, it's easy to put out misinformation, and it's easy to control, right? To mess with the algorithms such that certain points of view are more prominent. And so that's on that side. But I think fundamentally, though, just that number go up factor is going to drive a lot more people thinking about Bitcoin. They'll learn about it. They'll start coming and buying it. They will then really start thinking a little bit more deeply about what the economy is and why it's limping, as we were saying. The government is kind of forcing us to limp instead of being able to run at full pace. So I definitely think this next year or two will be really big in terms of people coming into Bitcoin and then building alternatives. Like I really think that's maybe the way things are going to go, because they realize that certain parts of the world, they're just stuck in their kind of prison of their own mind. And that there'll be those other people out there who really want freedom and they want financial sovereignty, and they're going to do what it takes to get it.
Yeah, it just seems like it's this. It just continues to speed up. I mean, so if we look at, like you already referenced, like 1971, kind of getting off the gold standard. How things. I mean, we're in August was the 50-year anniversary, and like things probably kind of moved kind of slowly for the first 10 years and 20 years, but now they seem to be accelerating really fast. I mean, as a matter of fact, like we added more debt in the last like 2 years than we had in the previous 48 or whatever it was, and so we're like really accelerating really fast. And then the faster things start falling apart because of that. And then it almost kind of becomes like their own marketing. So like, in the United States, the CPI says we've had 5.5% inflation. Anyone that goes shopping knows that's kind of a lie. It's probably 15 to 20% at least, 20, 25. I mean, homes are up 25%, cars are up 30%. And that's motivating, right? We see people wanting to spend their dollars as fast as they can. But in countries like Lebanon or Iran, it's happening even way faster. But then they start trying to squeeze things. And so so now they're talking about taxing unrealized capital gains.
Insane.
And that only just forces people to do new things. I think going back to China, I was reading last week, they said obviously people are still buying Bitcoin there, but the sale of gold has like gone through the roof. Now in China, they're not able to buy like bullion, so they have these lines that wrap around buildings. People are trying to buy gold jewelry there, and so people are always going to look for that safety valve. And so it's almost like the more they squeeze, the faster things go. The more people leave, which then makes it get worse, which then makes them squeeze harder, which makes more people leave. So I don't know. I think probably over the next 4 to 5 years, I think things are going to unravel pretty quickly. That's my guess.
I'm with you there. In terms of like the overall, I think we are going to the fiat system is very difficult to sustain, and so once people have a real alternative, they will choose that alternative, and I see that definitely. I think we'll see that.
Yeah. Let's shift gears just a little bit. I saw that you're doing some. Obviously, you're an awesome educator. You spend a lot of time educating people on and Bitcoin as well. And I know you've been. I think you created a course for Sailor.org.
Yes.
Is that right? Tell us about that for a minute.
Yeah, so that's a free Bitcoin education course. Michael Saylor asked me to call it a 12-hour educational course for people. And I try to cover a little bit of everything, right? A little bit of economics, technology, the history, philosophy, how to use Bitcoin. And it also included a live series where I actually did some live interviews with Vijay Boyapati, Parker Lewis, Jimmy Song, Aaron Van Weerdem, Matt Odell, and Michael Saylor himself, who joined us. So that was that series, and I think it's done very well. I think it's been a lot of signups there, and it's been a relatively popular series, and it's free, of course. So Sailor.org, and people can search. I think the course is PRDV151. But basically, if you go to Sailor.org and you search the courses, search Bitcoin, you'll see Bitcoin for Everybody, which is the course that I curated.
Yeah, so I love that. I mean, I just love the fact that he put that together. I love the fact that you and so many others are contributing to that. And that kind of goes back to that internet, right? Which is kind of this explosion of information. I'm not the only one. I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it plenty, other people have, but this kind of Renaissance 2.0 where if you look back in history, going from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance, I think there was kind of two main drivers or catalysts, right? One, the explosion of information because of the printing press, and two, we had the sound money from the florin, and then that went into the greatest expansion, greatest prosperity the world had ever seen. And we kind of have the same two things again, right? The internet is increasing people's education, and then we have sound money again. And so I love to see. It's a love and hate, right? It's like half the world, I think you kind of said this, we're looking at things through a right-leaning lens, but like half the world does appear to be sleepwalking through and happy to outsource their thinking and happy to listen to their experts or leaders and do whatever they say. And that's discouraging. But then there's like a whole lot of people that are really getting motivated and they're really getting interested to learn and educate. So I think it's very encouraging from that perspective. And so seeing your course and people buying into it, I think that's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way things go is free education and people who are willing to actually question and challenge and at least critically analyze the things that they're being told on the television or by their government or even, I mean, by people, right? Even by you and me, they should critically analyze what you and I are saying. Like, don't just take what Mark and Stephan are saying as gospel. You have to do your own thinking about it as well.
Yep. Cool. Well, we covered a lot. Hopefully that's helpful. I really was, like I said, I was really looking forward to just kind of hearing your stories of getting out of Australia. And like I said, I talked to a lot of people about, I would probably leave if I was forced that, and I think other people should. So hopefully that was super helpful for everybody. Stephan, where do you want to point people to anything that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so listeners, you can find me at stephanlivera.com. You can subscribe to the podcast there. And if you're interested to buy Bitcoin, we help you buy Bitcoin as well over at swanbitcoin.com. Particularly if you're a high net worth investor or a business or looking to stack as part of your entity, go to swanprivate.com. So those are the main resources. But basically, anyone who wants to find me online, if you search Stephan Livera or Stephan Bitcoin, you'll probably find me. But yeah, thanks again, Mark. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
You're not a hard guy to find online, that's for sure. You've been putting out great stuff for a long time. And of course, Stephan will be in Miami with me next month. So you can come meet Stephan, shake his hand, say hi, see both of us at the marketdisruptorslive.com event. So hopefully we'll see you there. And with that, we'll sign it off. Thanks so much, Stephan.
Thank you.